Welcome again to our online Bible study from Pine Valley Church of Christ. We have been looking at the letters of Peter as he wrote them at the end of his life and saw the things that he thought was really important to pass on to those early Christians. We're going to continue along in that same line of thought and looking at people who at the end of their lives reflected back on it and wanted people to understand what they had learned through life. And there's no better example than the book of Ecclesiastes, as it is truly a reflection on all of the things of life that truly are meaningless and futile to pursue as they compare to a life of faith in the God who is in heaven. And so over the next few weeks, we're going to be looking at that together. I thought we would begin classes this week before the first sermon, which is coming up on Sunday, by just giving you some introductory information to help you in your reading and your understanding as we go along. So let me get my screen share up. And I've entitled the series The Bonfire of the Vanities. The old translations about vanity, vanity, all of life is vanity. Newer translations talk about it. They are meaningless, or it is foolishness. It's the same type of thing. But I use this because he, going through here, talks about all of the things that are of this world, which we get caught up in, which really are meaningless or are vanities. If you're into literature, you may be aware of the book Bonfire of Vanities, written by Thomas Wolfe in, I believe it was 1987. A movie was made of it in 1990. And it was a story of all of the kind of corruption, power, wealth, influence peddling, all those things that were taking place in Wall Street at that time, and how it could all come crumbling down. But the name itself is a reference to an actual historical event, which took place in Florence, Italy on February 7th, 1497. And it was some followers of a Dominican monk by the name of Savonarola, who had been preaching to the people that they needed to remove themselves from the vanities of this world, things that could easily lead them into sin. And so on that day, they gathered together things from all over the city and took things from people, things like pieces of art, books, even cosmetics. Anything that could be seen as leading someone into sin was taken and then burned in this great bonfire, as if this was going to purge the city of the influence of evil in sin. But as we know, those kind of things don't tend to last. And the people continued on as they always have. And that's sort of the point of the book of Ecclesiastes. Human beings have been the same from the very beginning. And we're going to see there are a lot of comparisons made by the writer with those first 11 chapters of the book of Genesis and what happened with those early people. And basically saying, look, people have been these kind of people from the very beginning. And this is how we look at things. But there is an alternative. So just as some background material, we'll sort of look at those basic who, what, when, why kind of questions. I'll go ahead and answer the when for you now, and we'll discuss it more as we go along. The when is we don't know, because it seems to be a collection of the writers of this individual, this wise man, this preacher, as he is referred to, and we'll get on to that and go ahead and look at the who. The title is given in the first verse, and these are the words of the teacher, son of David, king in Jerusalem. It is very easy from this just to immediately make the connection with Solomon, which we probably should do. He was the son of David. He refers to himself then in verse 12 as I, the teacher, was king over Israel in Jerusalem. And he refers to Israel as a whole. It does seem to be that it is at a time when the kingdom has been divided and there is Israel and there is Judah. But it is a unified country. And we know from the book of Kings that this was who Solomon was. It was the gift given to him by God when he asked for it. And we can look at that passage in 1 Kings 4, that God gave Solomon wisdom and very great insight and a breadth of understanding as measureless as the sand on the seashore. And Solomon's wisdom was greater than the wisdom of all the people of the East, greater than all the wisdom of Egypt. He was wiser than anyone else. And his fame spread to all the surrounding nations, and he spoke 3,000 proverbs, and his songs numbered 1,005. He spoke about plant life from the cedar of Lebanon to the hyssop that grows out of walls. He also spoke about animals and birds, reptiles and fish. From all nations, people came to listen to Solomon's wisdom, sent by all the kings of the world who had heard of his wisdom. So it wasn't just about writing proverbs or even psalms, but he got into the study of nature and other things. And as you go through the book of Kings and the parallels found in Chronicles, you see Solomon getting involved in a lot of different things. Unfortunately, these things began to influence him away from a true focus on God who is in heaven to the things and the pleasures of this world. And now it seems that he is reflecting back on this, his life, the mistakes that he has made, and what he sees as truly meaningful, that he wants to pass it on to others. But we also know that reading through, especially from the first verse, and there's some other occasions throughout the book, and at the very end in chapter 12, that there is another individual here. There is an editor, maybe we would call him a student of the preacher. And the term preacher or teacher comes from that word koheleth in Hebrew, which when it's translated into Greek becomes the word we have today, Ecclesiastes. But he keeps referring to this preacher in the third person. But then as he's reporting it, he seems to be quoting the preacher directly, and it moves to a first person narrative during all these different insights that he shares throughout. So it is very possible that we have, and we don't know when this would have happened, but it's very possible that we have a student of the philosophy, the writings, the teachings of Solomon, who has gathered together this material and put it together. Not unlike we see the book of Proverbs, which was written, not all of it by Solomon, but by many others, but it was collected together by a group or an individual inspired by God to write these things down. And the what is something of great interest and discussion and debate over the years. It is a very enigmatic book to come to an understanding. It is, at one hand, he seems totally depressed with what's going on in the world, and then at other times he's saying, well, all you can do is go out and eat, drink, and be merry. It almost makes you think that he's bipolar or has these great mood swings back and forth depending on what's going on in his life. But within the literature itself, it fits within Near Eastern ancient wisdom literature as it is presented to us. And it's coming at it from a very cynical and pessimistic look. You know, this is an individual's life who has been greatly influenced by the things that have happened to him, the things that he sees around him, and caused him to be extremely cynical in his approach. And again, this type of approach to wisdom was known in the ancient Near East. It became well known in Greece later on among the Cynics and the Stoics and their approach to philosophy of the time. But this is the basic approach that when we look at this world and this life, it is uh, can lead you to being extremely cynical. But he then wants to also help us see the alternative to that. I like the quote from one of the commentaries that I've been reading from Michael Eaton. I think he expresses it well. It's actually is an essay in apologetics. It defends the life of faith in a generous God by pointing to the grimness of the alternative. It's not unlike the book of Hebrews, which keeps telling these early Jewish Christians who are being influenced either by Greek philosophy or by their Jewish families to go back to their former life and leave their faith in Jesus by comparing the two, what happens if you do that, and defending the life of faith in Jesus, who truly is the embodiment of a generous God. And there is no other hope. And this is really the approach of the book of Ecclesiastes as it has collected this material together and presents it to us from probably the writings or mouth of Solomon himself. And this editor wants to make sure that it is passed on. And it's interesting how he does it because there's there is no mention of the name of God, Yahweh, in Ecclesiastes, which has caused some to want to leave it out of Scripture. But there is very little mention of Israel. There is very little mention of the law. But he seems to want to present it in a very universal approach where this could be read by anybody. And of course, if you have Solomon has people coming to him from all over the world to hear his wisdom. He's going to put it into terms that are translatable to anybody's life in any culture, anywhere in the world. And so I've used the title Bonfire of the Vanities because through the book, you've heard about throwing things or a person under the bus. He throws everything and anything that you can think of that people give their life to in this world. He throws it on the fire and shows it burning because whether it's laughter or drink or possessions or sex, work, wisdom, wealth, honor, children, even religion, as we'll see as we go through, he says all of this is just meaningless. You might as well just burn it, get rid of it, unless it is approached in the proper way. And in the end, he says, we have to remember that God is the final judge, God in heaven. And it can be a fiery ordeal if we have not put our faith in him. And so throughout, he makes this contrast. And you see throughout the book this phrase, life under the sun. In other words, this is the life we see on this earth that has been around because of the sinfulness and selfishness of humans from the very beginning. And he contrasts that with the life of faith in God who is in heaven, the one who designed everything, the one who knows everything. And the wisdom of man cannot even compare, as Paul says in 1 Corinthians 1, to the foolishness of God. And he wants them also to see that there are limits to what humans can accomplish. We like to pat ourselves on the back and think about how far we've come, what we can now do, the technology, and all these types of things, but there are limits. And even in pursuing those things, it doesn't really accomplish what needs to be accomplished, which is coming to a real understanding of the meaning of life, which he goes through all of this burning down of all these arguments, of all these focus of life. And he brings it all down to one phrase at the end of the book. Fear God, keep his commandments, for this is the whole duty of man. And we'll talk about this more as we through on a weekly basis. But actually, the word duty is not there in the Hebrew. The Hebrew just says, "For this is the whole of man. This is who we are supposed to be. This is what is supposed to be the meaning of your life." Rather than focusing on self and self-reliance, we turn in fear to God, in awe of him, and keep his commandments. We focus on what he has directed us as our creator to do and how we should be living. So this gives you a very quick background to the book of Ecclesiastes. I hope that'll be helpful to you, and as we go through it in the weeks to come in our Sunday morning sermon series and through our other classes. So hope that you'll be reading ahead in this book before our class on Sunday. And between now and then, please stay safe, stay healthy, and may God bless you as you seek to serve him and to serve others.